As Lu Shang's body radiated suffocating energy, he gathered momentum, his expression full of unwavering determination. He moved closer to the entrance of the spatial crack, but suddenly, a mutant beast erupted from the ground. The creature, a massive worm wreathed in evil energy, thought it had found easy prey. Its roar shattered the silence as it lunged toward him, destroying the area around it. Lu Shang, however, didn't even flinch. Without hesitation, he continued toward the crack, eyes locked on the beast. His grip tightened around his spear, its tip glowing with golden energy. Hatred flickered in his gaze as the beast blocked his path, daring to challenge him. The mutant beast, oblivious to the massive power gap, surged forward, ready to devour Lu Shang whole. But before it could strike, Lu Shang leaped into the air, his movements swift and deadly. With a single, decisive swing of his spear, he sliced the beast cleanly in half, the creature's body splitting as if it were nothing more than a fragile cake. The beast let out a screech of agony as it collapsed, its body plummeting lifelessly to the ground. Lu Shang, unbothered by the destruction behind him, resumed his march toward the spatial crack, his pace unbroken. The soldiers and the general watched in disbelief. A single blow, that's all it took for Lu Shang to annihilate a level 8 mutant beast. The general's jaw dropped as he tried to comprehend the sheer power he had just witnessed. His thoughts raced. This is a double S-rank spatial crack, with a level 10 uprising inside, he muttered to himself, stunned. Anyone trapped in there hasn't even had a chance to escape yet, and this guy, he's heading straight in? The general shook his head, calling it madness. Is he seeking death? Dong Shengyi, still kneeling on the ground, placed his hands on his knees, his gaze fixed downward. Guilt washed over him, weighing heavily on his shoulders. Lin Wanwan approached him quietly, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder in an attempt to console him. It's not your fault, she whispered softly, her voice trembling. But Dong Shengyi couldn't shake the feeling of responsibility. He looked up, eyes following Lu Shang's determined march toward the crack. He'd seen countless people face death, but none had ever shown the same unshakable will as Lu Shang. Dong Shengyi clenched his fists. He couldn't help but be in awe. This man, with every step forward, was a force unto himself. Lu Shang reached the edge of the spatial crack, blue energy swirling around his body. Without hesitation, he leaped into the abyss, determination etched on his face. His mission was clear: save Dong Qingxue, no matter what. Dong Shengyi, watching from above, could no longer deny it. Lu Shang was the man Dong Qingxue cared for deeply. Moments later, Lu Shang landed on the 5th level of the spatial crack. Without missing a beat, a towering mutant beast emerged, its body cloaked in malevolent energy, a helmet resting atop its grotesque head. The creature roared, preparing to attack. But Lu Shang didn't wait. In a blur of motion, he charged forward, spear in hand. With a swift strike, he severed the beast's neck, its life extinguished before it even realized what had happened. His eyes narrowed, scanning the fallen beast. No time to waste. Consulting his system, he quickly pulled up Dong Qingshue's profile. His heart raced as he saw signs of life. She was still alive, just trapped somewhere in the abyss. Clenching his spear tightly, Lu Shang surged forward, running toward the next level. He couldn't afford any delays. Hold on, Dong Qingxue, he muttered through gritted teeth. I'm coming. Elsewhere, deep inside the belly of a massive beast, a grotesque scene unfolded. The ground was covered in writhing tentacles and drool, while the stench of decay permeated the air. Amidst the horror, Dong Qingxue lay unconscious, her legs soaked in the creature's saliva. Her fist, still clenched over her chest, began to glow faintly with a soft blue light. Slowly, the energy from the O-shaped pendant in her hand, the one Lu Shang had given her, started to weaken. But it was enough. Her eyes fluttered open, confusion clouding her thoughts. Am I in heaven? She wondered weakly. Sweat dripped from her forehead, the heat inside the beast unbearable. The pendant's glow flickered, growing fainter by the second. As she studied it, the realization hit her. Lu Shang had saved her. Her heart skipped a beat. With a deep breath, she gathered what little strength she had left. She wasn't dead, not yet. Dong Qingxue struggled to her feet, her legs trembling beneath her. As she looked around the grotesque space, unease gnawed at her. Is this inside the stomach of the beast? Her eyes widened as she pieced together her surroundings. She had been swallowed, but somehow she had survived. Now, she had to figure out how to escape. before it was too late. Dong Qingxue barely took a step before a slimy tentacle coiled around her leg. Startled, she froze as more tentacles slithered out, swiftly wrapping around her arms and legs. Her body was lifted into the air, leaving her suspended, immobile. Despite the terror gripping her, she refused to let go of the glowing O-shaped pendant in her hand. Beads of sweat ran down her face as panic set in. What were these things? The tentacles tightened, their grip growing more sinister. One snaked its way under her skirt, another creeping dangerously toward her mouth. Why were there tentacles inside the beast's stomach? Confusion and fear blurred her thoughts as another, even larger tentacle with a gaping mouth appeared. It was covered in jagged teeth, drool dripping from its maw as it slowly approached her. She closed her eyes, bracing herself for the inevitable. Just as the monstrous tentacle was about to devour her, the O-shaped pendant erupted with a blinding golden light. The radiant flash scorched the tentacles, burning through them like vampires caught in the sun. The tentacles recoiled in agony, their bodies searing as they retreated. Dong Qingxue, clutching the pendant in one hand, instinctively raised her other fist to her chest. A glowing golden barrier encased her, shielding her from the relentless attack. Within moments, the tentacles collapsed, retreating into the shadows. She fell to the ground, her body trembling, now splattered with the blood of the burnt tentacles. Her breathing was labored, her body slick with sweat and the creature's foul fluids. The pendant's energy was fading fast. It had protected her for now, but the power was rapidly depleting. One more attack, and she might not survive. She felt a searing pain across her chest. The blood on her skin was burning, corrosive. Her clothes were disintegrating under the acid, and she could feel her flesh blistering. This was bad. If the blood didn't kill her, the beast surely would. Dong Qingxue crouched low, her mind racing. She had to escape. Now, with a serious, focused gaze, she scanned her surroundings. The air inside the beast was thick and suffocating, made worse by the noxious fumes. If she weren't a level 6 martial artist, she would have already passed out. But this was no time to rely on her endurance. She couldn't afford to stay here any longer. Shakily, she stood, her body trembling from both exhaustion and pain. Sweat poured down her face as she reached out to the walls of the creature's stomach. Gathering all the spiritual power she had left, she summoned concentrated thunder energy to her hand. The crackling electricity surged around her fingers as she prepared for a final attack. This is the only way out. With a powerful thrust, she unleashed the full force of her attack, aiming to blast a hole through the beast's stomach walls. There was no turning back now. Dong Qingxue's attack faded into smoke as she blinked in disbelief. Her concentrated energy had barely scratched the beast's tough stomach lining. Panic surged within her as she extended her hand again, launching another desperate strike. The second attack did nothing. "No!" she gasped, sweat dripping from her brow as her trembling hands lit up with more spiritual power. Again, she struck. Again, and again. But the beast's insides remained untouched, mocking her futile efforts. Exhausted and drained, Dong Qingxue collapsed to the ground, eyes closing in defeat. This can't be it. I can't die here. She clenched her fists, panting heavily, the sting of hopelessness weighing her down. Her phone, barely clinging to her side, slipped from her pocket and hit the floor with a faint thud. The screen lit up in the dimness. Through her labored breathing, she glanced at it, heart racing. Slowly, with shaking hands, she picked it up. Lu Sheng's contact. Her thumb hovered over the screen, trembling as tears brimmed in her eyes. If this was the end, she wanted to tell him everything. But before she could send the message, the phone slipped from her weakened grip, crashing to the ground. Her vision blurred as her body gave in to exhaustion, and she fainted, collapsing beside it. Not long after she hit the floor, the tentacles slithered back into the space, as if sensing her helplessness. One by one, they coiled around her legs, lifting her off the ground. Her limp body floated, powerless against their grip. Perhaps in another life, she thought, as the darkness closed in, she might get to be with Lu Sheng. But now, all she could feel was cold, tightening tendrils wrapping around her body, inching closer to her head. Outside the spatial crack, night had begun to fall. The air was calm, but inside, chaos roared. A mutant beast lunged from the darkness, its mouth gaping wide, ready to tear apart anything in its path. But just before it could attack, a flash of light cut through the air. Lu Sheng, with a single powerful leap, His spear crackled with thunder as he moved with lightning speed. In one swift strike, the blade tore through the beast's jaw, cutting it clean in half. The creature stood frozen in shock, unable to comprehend what had just happened, its body collapsing in pieces. Lu Shang, his body now wreathed in flames, calmly surveyed the battlefield. Dong Qingshua's pendant. The seed of his spiritual energy was embedded in it, but he couldn't feel her presence. He was still too far away. Gripping his spear tightly, his determination sharpened. "I'll find you." He surged forward, his eyes fierce. The spatial crack held countless beasts, and he was prepared to annihilate them all if it meant finding Dong Qingxue. Lu Shang's fist clenched as he landed with a thundering crack, his eyes scanning the desolate battlefield. Just ahead, a pack of mutant beasts stirred in shock at the sight of the martial artist within the spatial crack. They hesitated, unsure of how to handle a human so powerful, but Lu Shang had no intention of waiting. With a forceful stomp, golden lightning crackled under his foot. His body surged with energy as fire ignited around him, flames licking his skin while chunks of ice materialized in the air. Holding his spear in one hand, he drove his clenched fist toward the ground. The ice began to spread rapidly across the terrain, freezing the very ground beneath his feet. The mutant beasts glanced at each other, bewildered as the ice crept up their legs, rooting them in place. Confusion clouded their minds. How could anyone wield the opposing elements of fire and ice simultaneously? Lu Shang's eyes gleamed with a deadly light. "Die." His voice cut through the air like a blade, filled with cold, ruthless intent. The beasts barely had time to react before more of them emerged, lured by the surge of spiritual energy, thinking they could overwhelm him. Lu Shang advanced, unleashing a terrifying wave of energy, dark and destructive like the demons of ancient tales. The flames surrounding his body flared brighter, hotter, fueled by his growing fury. His martial will sharpened like a blade, and before the beasts could even attempt an attack, Lu Shang moved with impossible speed. In a blink, his spear danced through the air, slicing through several beasts with surgical precision. Limbs and torsos fell like debris as their bodies disintegrated into the frozen ground. Without a word, Lu Shang continued walking through the carnage, fists still clenched. Another beast lunged, desperate to tear him apart, but Lu Shang didn't flinch. He knew time was slipping away. If he didn't find Dong Qingxue soon, it could be too late. "Not fast enough," he muttered. He tightened his grip on the spear, and with a powerful leap, his body cut through the air, landing directly in front of the charging beast. With a swift motion, he slashed through its neck, the beast's agonized screams echoing through the crack as it crumbled to the ground. Desperation clawed at him. "I have to reach her." His focus sharpened, golden energy crackling around his form as he readied himself for the next wave. Two nearby mutant beasts froze, stunned by the golden energy radiating from Lu Shang. He shifted his strategy. This wasn't just about fighting anymore, it was about speed, precision. He leaped into the air, extending his spear backward, eyes locked on the target. His spear ignited with a blazing flame, the intense heat burning like the sun itself. With a determined glare, Lu Shang used all his strength and hurled the spear forward, the technique known as piercing activating in full force. The spear shot through the air like a meteor, tearing apart everything in its path. The mutant beasts stood no chance. One by one, they were shredded, their bodies disintegrating as if they were nothing more than insects. Smoke billowed out behind the spear's destructive wake, forming a thick curtain of chaos. But Lu Shang was in control. The spear wasn't just flying randomly. It was a guided missile, its deadly course controlled by his spiritual energy. The beasts were annihilated. The very ground beneath the spatial crack trembled as the spear's force tore through it, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Without a moment to lose, Lu Shang landed softly, one knee pressed to the ground. He could feel it. He was getting closer to Dong Qingxue. His body hummed with power, flames swirling around him, eyes burning with unyielding resolve. He would find her, no matter what. Seconds after the spear smashed into the spatial crack's wall, its energy condensed into a single point, a pulse building until, boom, a massive explosion tore through the ground, creating a gaping hole that crackled with residual energy. Lu Shang, fists clenched, wasted no time. He stared down into the abyss, realizing with a sharp inhale that she was right there. His body surged with power, golden thunder rippling around him as he muttered, "Hold on, Dong Qingxue, I'm coming." He launched himself into the hole, transforming into a blur of golden energy as he descended. His body ricocheted off the walls of the crack, leaving behind streaks of lightning in his wake. From level 14 to level 15, and soon after, level 40, each descent faster than the last. His eyes gleamed with determination, tracking the faint energy signature of the pendant he had given Dong Qingxue. "I'm close," he murmured, pushing himself even faster. Ahead, a solid rock wall blocked his path. Without hesitation, he clenched his fist, flames coiling around his arm. "She's behind that wall." His heart pounded as he delivered a punch, channeling all his energy into the strike. The impact shattered the wall in an instant, sending debris flying in every direction. What lay beyond stopped him in his tracks. A grotesque creature stood before him, its massive mouth lined with thousands of sharp teeth, its tongue dripping with foul drool. The beast slept soundly, until it sensed Lu Shang's presence. Slowly, the monstrous macrage worm stirred, its body radiating a suffocating, purple energy. For a moment, Lu Shang stood still, his fiery gaze locked onto the worm. Compared to the hulking beast, he appeared insignificant, an ant before a mountain. But his fists tightened. Dong Qingxue's energy is fading. "I don't have time for this." The worm, realizing Lu Shang was no ordinary human, chose not to charge in recklessly. Instead, it switched tactics. The beast opened its cavernous mouth even wider, sucking in the surrounding energy until a massive burst of thunder began forming at its core. In seconds, the beast unleashed the attack, a roaring wave of destructive energy rushing toward Lu Shang like a tidal wave. As the thunderous burst hurtled toward him, Lu Shang remained unnervingly still, head tilted upward to watch the attack approach. His jaw clenched, his knuckles whitened. This thing hurt Dong Qingxue. The thought burned through his mind, fueling the fury boiling in his chest. With a swift motion, Lu Shang raised his fist, condensing every ounce of his energy into a single, pinpoint strike. "This ends now." The instant the worm's energy burst was within range, Lu Shang leaped. His fist collided with the attack, shattering it effortlessly. The shockwave of his energy obliterated the worm's power, sending crackling fragments of the burst scattering harmlessly into the air. The worm froze, eyes wide in disbelief. Lu Shang, unharmed, began his advance. The beast, towering above him, trembled. Sweat poured from its grotesque form, its purple energy flickering in fear. Lu Shang's energy surged, hotter and more intense with every step, his rage palpable. The worm knew. It was afraid, but fear wouldn't save it now. Lu Shang's body crackled with blue energy as he locked eyes on the monstrous beast. A flash of realization hit him. Dong Qingxue was inside. Without hesitation, he gathered his power, transforming into pure energy. In a blur, he shot straight into the beast's gaping mouth, launching a devastating attack downward. His energy pierced through the creature's body with relentless force. The worm writhed in agony, but Lu Shang wasn't done. He unleashed another strike, more ferocious than the first, his voice commanding, "Give her back." The beast's body buckled under the sheer pressure, splitting apart as Lu Shang, now sharp as a blade of energy, cleaved it in half. Its tortured screams echoed through the spatial crack. Deep inside the beast's stomach, Dong Qingxue lay still, unconscious but alive. Sticky tentacles bound her tightly, slime covering her form, trapping her. As the golden glow of Lu Shang's energy closed in, her eyes fluttered open. Groggy and disoriented, she mistook the light for the approach of death. "Is this it?" she thought, tears welling up as she braced herself for the end. But instead of death, it was salvation. The golden energy tore through the tentacles, freeing her. Lu Shang's voice cut through the chaos, calling her name. Dong Qingxue blinked in confusion, her vision clearing. The beast's blood splattered around her, but she barely noticed. Slowly, she brought a trembling hand to her chest, still trying to grasp what was happening. Then, a warm hand slid under her arm. She looked up, there he was. Lu Shang, his face calm but his eyes full of concern. He gently lifted her into his arms, a soft smile spreading across his face. "I told you I'd find you," he said, his voice steady. Dong Qingxue's heart raced. She pressed a hand against his chest, her face burning with embarrassment. Seeing Lu Shang standing there, having come to rescue her, she couldn't stop the flood of emotions that rushed through her. Her cheeks turned bright red, and her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Lu Shang held her gaze, his own smile growing wider, the weight of worry lifting from his shoulders. Petals from the torn space drifted around them as if the universe itself was acknowledging their moment. "It's time to go home," he said softly, eyes locked with hers. Dong Qingxue, still blushing, nodded. "Yes," she whispered, her voice filled with relief and gratitude.